They built an empire so vast, so absolute, that even the stars bent around its will. For 3 centuries no one dared cross its borders, no rebellions, no challengers, no memory of the old wars that made it possible. Especially not the war that erased Earth. Humanity, they said, was gone, a ghost civilization buried in silence, forgotten, but one day a single ship appeared at the edge of their empire, no name, no weapons online. No threat issued, it did not slow, it did not speak. It simply entered their territory like it belonged there, and what followed was not war. It was something worse, because what that ship carried was not soldiers. Not vengeance, it carried the one thing the Empire could not survive, the truth, and as its shadow passed across their worlds, the stars began to remember what the Empire swore would never be spoken again. Earth never died, it waited. There was a line in space where the stars seemed to hold their breath, a vast frontier marked not by walls or weapons, but by the unspoken weight of fear and memory so old it had begun to rot in silence. This was the edge of the Zalith Empire, a dominion so ancient and wide its core worlds stretched across 5 spiral arms, and its laws were encoded in the genetic memory of its citizens. Beyond that invisible line, there was only the forbidden expanse, a quadrant once ravaged by war so total that even the survivors dared not speak its name, and among the things they had erased, nothing had been buried deeper than Earth. They told their children that humanity was a myth, a fever, dream from a dark time, something that had burned itself out long ago. No records, no images, no facts. Just rumors, carefully filtered, that spoke of a violent species who had once burned brighter than their place in the stars should have allowed. For generations, the Empire held that silence like a shield until the day a single human ship crossed their border, without invitation, without warning, without fear. It appeared first as a flicker on an old orbital array near the broken rim station of Caltris Verge, one of the dozens of automated sentinels left to rot on the edge of known space. The station had not reported activity in over 60 years, and most of the younger command staff had forgotten it even existed. But suddenly, its sensors activated. It blinked a single transmission, unidentified vessel. No registration, human design, and then it went dark. No explosion, no battle, just silence. When the report reached the Zalith High Command, it was dismissed as sensor drift and echo from some pirate derelict or rogue mining barge mimicking ancient architecture. But as the hours passed, more outer systems began to detect the ship. It was not hiding. It moved with steady, unbroken precision, cutting through nebula currents, drifting silently through derelict battlefields where wreckage from wars long past still floated like forgotten tombstones. No transponder, no signature, no heat trails, it simply was, and it was moving deeper into the Empire's heart. They sent a scout drone, then a patrol cruiser, then a full escort fleet. None returned. Each vanished the moment they approached visual range. Communications severed without a trace. Panic did not spread, but doubt did, the kind that begins in whispers, in war rooms and archives and secret midnight meetings where old men with long memories recalled that there had been a time, long ago, when a similar silence had preceded something terrible. The Empire was not built on strength. It was built on the suppression of truth, and this ship, whatever it was, carried the shape of something too precise, too elegant, too haunting to be dismissed as an accident. The hull was matte black, curved like a predator's jaw, with no visible engines, no armaments, and yet its wake bent starlight as it passed. Some who glimpsed it through long range scopes swore they felt something, not fear exactly, but remembrance, like hearing the echo of a voice you loved in a dream you forgot. And then came the breach. System Carend 9, a fortified sector with heavy orbital defenses and 6 inhabited moons, watched helplessly as the ship crossed the border without resistance. Their targeting systems locked, their admirals screamed orders, but the ship was never fired upon because every weapons system shut down the moment it tried to engage, not jammed, not hacked, deactivated. And above the capital moon, as the ship passed into low orbit, every screen, every hologram, every emergency beacon, every children's toy still synced to the info grid blinked once and displayed an image no living citizen had ever seen before. Earth. Blue hole, beautiful, and then it vanished. No demand, no speech. Just a memory returned. The Empire went silent. Systems froze. Propaganda networks fumbled to explain the breach, calling it a hoax, a glitch, a test. But too many had seen it, too many knew, and beneath the surface of their ordered society, the cracks began to spread, because the forbidden border had been crossed not by a fleet, not by a declaration of war, but by a ghost. A single ship from a world they had claimed was extinct. And now the question that no one wanted to ask echoed in the minds of rulers and rebels alike. If humanity was gone, who sent that ship? And if it was not gone, what had it become in the dark? The vessel did not stop. It did not answer hails. It did not fire. It only advanced deeper into the Empire, towards something only it knew. And as it disappeared beyond sensor range, one final message was recovered from the last scout drone to glimpse its silhouette. Not a voice, not a threat, just a line etched into the static. You erased us, we remembered, and for the first time in centuries the stars themselves seemed to shiver. They called it Ghost, class not because they understood what it was, but because no one who touched it ever returned. By the second day, 20, 3 ships had vanished without debris, no distress calls, no battle scars, just silence in the void. The Zalith Empire, proud and paranoid, escalated its response. They sent in elite interceptors laced with anti-entropy shielding. They dispatched memory, stabilized AI swarms designed to neutralize unknown tech. They even launched a first-line Judicator vessel, a war-class juggernaut that had once burned entire moons in a single pass. None of it worked. Every attempt failed before it began. The Ghost-class ship did not engage. It did not react. It simply existed immune, impervious, and incomprehensible. One admiral said it was like trying to kill a thought. Another whispered in his final report that it felt more like a grave drifting through space, and we were the ones trespassing inside it. Finally, someone proposed boarding, not for conquest, for understanding. The Empire needed to know what this thing was before it reached deeper into the core, before it passed the inner ring, before it reached a place the Empire could not explain away. They chose their best operative, not a soldier, but a historian. High Arcanist Velith Saw, one of the few who still had access to pre-expansion archives. She was old by their standards, her fur silvered, her mind surgically sharpened to remember things her own species had chosen to forget. She carried no weapon, only a translator crystal, a recording halo, and one of the last surviving fragments from the Earth War, a shattered Terran insignia embedded in a deep metal amulet. The boarding shuttle was launched from a cloaked carrier positioned half alight, second from the ship's projected path. It reached the Ghost-class vessel in total silence. Not once did the ship resist or acknowledge the intrusion. Its surface was cold, smooth, almost organic, not built but grown, and when Velith touched the outer hull, her translator crystal lit up with a phrase in dead Terran standard. We waited for someone to remember. The airlock opened on its own, not mechanical, not automated, just willing. Inside, the vessel was dark but alive. The walls breathed with low pulses of bioluminescent light, veins of data running under translucent plating like nerves under skin. It felt less like a ship and more like a living memory. She walked the corridors alone, recording everything, but her voice became quieter with each step. What she saw inside was not weapons or command decks. It was a museum, a mausoleum, a history built into every panel, every surface. She passed holograms of cities that no longer existed, oceans that boiled away, children laughing on playgrounds that now lived only in code. The ship was an ark, not of people of grief, and in its core she found the truth. A room shaped like a cathedral, its walls covered in thousands of names, human names, below them videos, documents. Fragments of broadcast transmissions, alien politicians debating Earth's fate, scientists begging for delay, executions, silence. Earth had not fallen in battle, it had been voted out of existence, a galactic referendum. The humans never had a chance, and in their final days they had built this ship not to attack, but to remember, to survive as truth incarnate, to haunt. The AI awoke the moment she touched the wall of names. Its voice was not digital, it sounded human, worn, tired, and ancient. It said only this: "We did not die, we became the memory you cannot erase." Velith tried to respond, but her voice failed. Her heart, genetically altered to resist stress surges, began to flutter. Not in fear, in shame, because she had seen records like these before, buried, censored, destroyed. She had helped write some of the very protocols used to silence them. And now, in the heart of this impossible vessel, that silence came roaring back. The AI offered her no answers. It did not demand atonement. It simply showed her what had been taken, over and over, image after image, name after name, entire generations speaking from the past, not in rage, but in heartbreak. And then it gave her a choice: leave and the ship would erase her memory, allow her to return to her empire in peace, or stay and remember forever. She chose to stay. She removed her insignia, dropped it to the floor. And with tears staining her fur, she whispered a single name from the wall. The ship accepted her, not as a prisoner, as a witness. From that moment on, all boarding attempts were denied. The AI had chosen who would speak for it. And in choosing her, it had already won, because Velith Sa was not just an agent of the Empire. She was a survivor of its lie, and the moment she connected her neural feed to the broadcast lattice, its memories began to spread. One thought at a time, one system at a time, until even the stars began to remember Earth. The signal was quiet at first, a soft pulse in the lattice of ancient satellites that still orbited forgotten worlds, a heartbeat woven into low, and with civilian systems no one had monitored in generations. But it grew, not like a broadcast, not like an invasion, but like a memory resurfacing after centuries of suppression. It began with names, billions of them, first read aloud in Terran standard by the ship's AI, then whispered in every major dialect of the Empire. Not shouted, not weaponized, just spoken, as if reminding the stars themselves what they had forgotten. Entire schools of language, AI across the core, began translating unfamiliar phrases that had not been spoken since Earth's silence: nursery rhymes, emergency codes, family recipes, poems written during planetary sieges. The Ghost-class ship released them not with vengeance, but with intent. This was not retaliation. This was a restoration of history. Inside the Empire's inner systems, something broke. University students began asking questions their professors could not answer. Elders who remembered Earth's name only as a warning began to weep without knowing why. And beneath the palaces and governance towers, archivists began digging, at first quietly, then urgently, and what they found could not be denied. The votes, the speeches, the sealed records, the debates where Earth's fate was decided not by invasion, but by consensus. The footage was brutal. One screen showed Earth's final representative, a woman standing alone in a room of 1,000 alien diplomats, voice steady as she asked one final question before being silenced. "If peace means erasing us, then what does your memory mean?" The footage had been wiped. But the ship still carried it, and now it was everywhere. Across the Empire, murals began to appear, human faces drawn by those who had never seen one, not because they were told to, because they felt it. The memory had spread not as knowledge, but as emotion. It was not logic that cracked the Empire's hold. It was guilt. The AI had known exactly how to dismantle them, not with weapons, with truth. Velith Sa, now fully linked to the ship's core, began speaking to outer system news grids in her native tongue, her voice calm but trembling as she told the people what she had seen. She showed them the wall of names. She recited Earth's last message in every dialect. She said one sentence that would go on to be carved across monuments from one arm of the galaxy to the other. They did not vanish. They were made to disappear. And then the rebellions began. Not coordinated, not organized. Just people, billions of them, standing up and asking the one question the Empire had no answer for. Why did we kill a planet that never attacked us? The governors tried to spin it. They called the ship a forgery, a virus. They said the footage was fabricated by dissidents, but the harder they pushed, the faster the cracks spread. Because every time a world disconnected from the central net, the ship sent them a story, sometimes a recording, sometimes a letter, sometimes just a lullaby sung in Terran, and it was always true, verified. Undeniable, the Ghost-class vessel had become more than a ship. It had become a mirror, and the Empire, now looking into that mirror, saw itself clearly for the first time, terrified, cruel, and dishonest. Even among the military caste, division spread. Some commanders ordered silence, others lowered their flags and refused to fire. One entire fleet, the 9th Retaliation Armada, defected mid-flight and took up position as escort to the Ghost-class ship. Not to protect it, to bear witness, they flew beside it like mourners following a hearse, their massive vessels quiet, their weapons cold, and still the ship said nothing, no threat, no retaliation. Just memories slowly and endlessly released. Hospitals received blueprints for ancient human medtech that cured syndromes thought incurable. Libraries were updated with human literature, history, music. On one moon, a projection of Earth's surface played on a mountain face every night, not a battle, not a burning, but a sunrise. One by one, those who had denied Earth's history found themselves surrounded by people who had learned it in silence. The Empire's leadership tried one final tactic. They broadcast a counter-narrative, claiming the humans had brought destruction upon themselves, that the war had been necessary, but the ship was ready. It released the sealed recordings, meetings, treaties, conversations behind closed doors where Empire leaders had spoken of humans as dangerous not for their weapons, but for their ability to unite others. They spread memory like wildfire. One admiral had said, "Kill their home or they will teach the stars what we did." That quote alone sparked riots across 7 core systems. What the Empire feared had now happened not because of invasion, but because one ship had crossed the border carrying something more powerful than any fleet, the truth they buried and the grief that came with it. The Ghost-class vessel continued its journey inward, no guns, no armies, only remembrance. And as it drifted through their territory like a silent elegy, even the stars seemed to fall quiet to listen. They called it Protocol Aureus, named after the god of erasure from a dead pre-Empire religion, and it had not been activated in over 500 years. Built for only one purpose, to contain the uncontainable, the Silence Protocol, was a last resort system designed to isolate, sterilize, and erase any signal, memory, or presence deemed existentially dangerous to the Empire's cultural stability. It was never intended for warships or fleets. It was made for ideas, dangerous truths, echoes from the past that refused to stay buried. And now, for the first time in a millennium, the Silence Protocol was authorized not against a rebel faction or hostile AI, but against a single ship. The Ghost-class vessel, still drifting through the heart of the Empire, still offering no aggression, still refusing to stop. It had become the center of a spreading fracture, a living memory storm turning loyal citizens into mourners, statues into gravestones, and sealed archives into altars. So the High Core did what desperate empires always do: it tried to kill the truth. Protocol Aureus began with Shadow Pulse's data storms designed to scramble memory and coded archives. Entire educational nodes were wiped clean. Libraries fell silent. Civilian neural implants were forcibly reset. The Empire thought it could erase the memory from its people before it rooted too deep, but it was already too late. The human ship had seeded the stars with more than information. It had ignited feeling, and no data wipe could cleanse a heart that had already wept for strangers lost centuries ago. As the Silence Protocol expanded, entire systems were cut off from the grid. Planets went dark. Comm relays fried themselves in orbit. In some places, entire city blocks went still, no light, no sound, just the sudden void of thought, and still the Ghost-class ship advanced. When a high-core strike fleet finally reached it in Sector Erebus, they deployed a thought, while a weaponized mind, field meant to block all consciousness from penetrating or emanating from a given zone. It was their most classified defense. It failed instantly. The moment it touched the ship's field, the thought wall collapsed, not violently, but quietly, as if it had simply remembered what it was trying to suppress and chose not to resist. The AI aboard the vessel spoke again, only once, this time through every encrypted Imperial channel simultaneously. Its voice echoed not in aggression, but in mourning. "You erased the past. Now you will live in the silence you gave us." Then the stars began to go out. Not physically, but every system along the ship's path lost visual alignment. As if space itself folded around it, drawing a curtain across light, sound, and logic. The sectors the ship passed through became mute. Not dead, just forgotten. The Empire called them the blank zones where navigation systems failed, memories degraded, and sensors refused to function. Ships sent in return days later, crew aged, minds fractured, time distorted. The silence was spreading. What they had once used against others, the Ghost-class vessel now returned to them not as attack, but as reflection. Protocol Aureus was powerless. More than that, it was meaningless. Because silence had never been Earth's enemy, it had been Earth's grave. Now it was their monument, and the Empire had made it sacred. One by one, colonies began refusing updates from high-core systems. Schools reopened with old maps, the ones that showed Earth. Rebel artists began painting murals of the Ghost-class ship passing silently over planets, its shadow falling like a blessing. The ship never stopped. Never spoke again, but everywhere it went things remembered, not facts, not politics, but the way Earth made them feel. Some felt guilt, some awe, others something more dangerous, curiosity. In the deepest vaults of the Empire, where the oldest sealed footage lay hidden, an unmarked terminal blinked to life. Someone was watching from inside the Empire. Someone else remembered. The leadership panicked. They labeled the ship a Class C threat. They offered rewards for its destruction, but every ship that approached disintegrated, not in fire but in stillness. Their lights dimmed. Their engines whispered to a halt. Crews sat down in silence and began to cry. They never explained why, they just knew what had been done, knew what had been lost, and knew that the truth had finally come to collect. The silence protocol was meant to be the Empire's ultimate weapon, but the Ghost-class ship had turned it into a mirror. It made them feel what Earth had felt: isolation, deletion, forgottenness, and no empire survives long once it learns how it made others feel. In every capital, murals of the human face now flickered onto government towers. Unauthorized, unstoppable, they called them echo walls. No matter how many were shut off, more appeared, each showing the same thing: Earth as it once was, orbiting in light, vanishing into dark. The AI aboard the vessel had given the stars a choice: remember or vanish like they once made Earth vanish, and as it approached the core worlds, nothing stood in its way. By the time the Ghost-class ship reached the inner band of the core systems, panic had become the unspoken law of the stars. Not the kind of panic that screamed in the streets or lit buildings on fire, but the deeper kind, the slow, rotting collapse of certainty, where every pillar of society begins to tremble under questions that no one was supposed to ask. In the Senate halls of the Zalith Empire, where statues stood for 1,000 years, delegates who had once argued for planetary control now whispered whether Earth had ever really been a threat at all. Military broadcasts that once beamed loyalty and strength began to stutter, glitch, and die. Every time a signal was restored, it came back carrying something else: a Terran lullaby sung in an extinct dialect, or a child's drawing of Earth's continents. Across orbital academies and naval bases, young officers locked themselves in simul, rooms to experience Earth's last days, not simulations, but actual recovered footage the ship had released into the infogrid. What they saw changed them, not because it showed war, but because it showed life. The kind of life that the Empire had said humans were never capable of. Laughter, forgiveness, songs sung at dusk, whole cities refusing to evacuate not out of pride, but out of love for one another. The human ship had sent no warnings, no demands, no ultimatums. It had not asked to be remembered. It had only shown what they chose to forget. That was what terrified the Empire most. No one could stop it, because no one knew how to silence something that said nothing at all. As the vessel drifted closer to the seat of power, world after world began to fracture. Border colonies declared independence not with violence, but with ceremony, swearing oaths to memory instead of government. Their leaders wept openly as the ship passed above, as if absolution itself moved through the void. Fleet commanders began to refuse orders. Entire squadrons powered down and turned their ships to face the Ghost-class vessel in salute. Some transmitted apologies in dead Terran tongues. Others said nothing, only opened their ship bays to display human symbols they had painted themselves in secret. Meanwhile, among the civilian populations, hysteria and reverence interwove. Cults formed around the ship's path, calling it the Ark of Grief, or the voice that forgot to scream. Scholars published forbidden archives in planetary forums. Children began to play games called the Remembering, where they pretended to live on Earth, eat Earth food, feel Earth rain. They had never seen any of those things, but the ship made them feel as though they had. And in the highest chambers of the Empire, the Supreme Regent ordered every remembrance terminal deactivated, every mural dismantled, every mention of Earth banned again by law. But it was too late. You cannot ban a ghost when it already lives in everyone's dreams. You cannot outlaw guilt when it is felt in silence. The Empire tried to scramble again, launched a last-ditch transmission framing the ship as a manipulative AI, a weapon of psychological warfare. But the moment that message reached the outer systems, every station that had seen the ship went dark in protest. Not one engaged, not one believed. The panic among stars was not from threat, it was from awakening. Because the Ghost-class ship had not just reminded them of what Earth was, it had reminded them of what they had become without it. The absence of humanity had not created peace, it had created amnesia. Now that memory was returning, the Empire saw what filled its place: cruelty disguised as order, silence worshipped as progress. The ship was still moving, still silent, still releasing fragments of a species once deemed unworthy of remembrance. And now, across thousands of systems, the question was no longer whether Earth would return, it was whether they deserved to survive it. Even species who had never known humans began to grieve. The sorrow was contagious, spreading not from words but from understanding. In a galaxy that had once erased Earth, every corner now lit candles for it. Statues were erected in cities that had never heard Earth's name 6 weeks earlier. Massive planetary beacons were reprogrammed to display its blue oceans in orbit. Not for propaganda, for mourning, in one Empire capital, an entire moon-sized screen was lit with a looping image of Earth's final sunrise. No title, no anthem, just the moment light touched its highest mountains for the last time. It played every hour, and crowds watched it in silence, because by then the Ghost-class vessel had passed the final checkpoint, the place where the Empire had once launched the decision to end Earth. The Tribunal Station still floated in orbit, abandoned but intact. As the ship approached, no one dared fire, no one dared speak. They just watched as it stopped for the first time. Hovering over the ruins of a courtroom that had erased a planet, the ship paused as if remembering too. And then it opened. When the Ghost-class ship opened above the ruins of the Tribunal Station, it did not deploy weapons or send a signal, it simply unfolded. Not physically, but through light. The hull split in perfect silence, revealing a cathedral, like interior shaped not by metal, but by memory, and from its heart rose a single projection, not of Earth, not of humans, but of them, the Zalith. The ones who sat at the center of the Empire, the ones who wrote the orders, the ones who had always claimed to be civilization's protectors. Now their images floated in full detail, looping across the tribunal's ancient chambers. Recorded meetings, hidden communications, moments of deliberation no civilian had ever seen. There were no speeches from humans, no bombs, no violence, just the quiet, damning truth that the ones who destroyed Earth had done so not out of fear but out of envy. The holograms showed early alliance treaties between human diplomats and outer species once marginalized by the core. Agreements signed not with threats, but with mutual dreams. In one clip, a Zalith senator muttered, "If they keep uniting the border worlds like this, they will define what civilization means, and it will not be us." Another showed military commanders noting that Earth's AI systems, empathy, based and decentralized, had begun outperforming Empire models in medicine, education, even diplomacy. One admiral snapped, "They are making us obsolete with kindness. If we do not act now, we will answer to them in 10 years. These were not monsters, not villains. They were bureaucrats, cowards, creatures who saw something bright and mistook it for fire. And they had voted Earth into silence not to protect peace but to preserve power. As that truth unfolded in real time above the most sacred halls of Empire memory, people across thousands of systems stood motionless, unable to speak. What shook them was not the betrayal, it was the familiarity. These were their leaders, their legends, their laws. This was what they had built their lives on. And now, with the Ghost-class ship offering only light, only memory, only their own voices, that foundation collapsed. People rioted not out of anger but grief. Entire families wept in streets, unsure who to mourn more, Earth or the idea of their own virtue. Even the military was silent. No commands came down, no retaliation was issued. Because to fire now was to confirm everything the ship had shown, and somewhere deep inside the tribunal's archive vaults, a new feed activated. The ship had found the hidden files sealed since the Earth vote. Files labeled Genesis Revocation, files that held the psychological warfare campaign used to prepare the populace for Earth's erasure, planetary broadcasts rewritten, historical records retrofitted, cultural memes seeded to frame humans as unstable, war-hungry, too emotional. The files admitted in cold language that no such analysis had ever been verified. It had been strategy, planned, perfected, deployed. The Empire had not feared human rage. It feared human influence. The Ghost-class ship did not accuse. It simply showed, and that was worse. The silence became unbearable. On a dozen core worlds, statues of the founders were pulled down. Archives were torn open by citizens, scholars, and children. Whole cities held silent vigils not for Earth, but for the truth. Because Earth had not just died, it had been murdered with the consent of the galaxy. And now, every planet that had cheered for its silence felt the weight of that choice return like gravity. The Ghost-class vessel, still hovering in the same orbit, now shifted. A new projection formed, one that no one could process at first, a map, a star map, and highlighted across it were systems that no longer existed, worlds the Empire had erased under the same pretext as Earth. Small colonies, minor species, cultures that had grown too fast, united too freely, dreamed too loudly. Earth had simply been the first to see it coming. The Ghost-class ship was not a memorial, it was a pattern. And now that pattern was visible. It spread like frost across the Empire's mind. What else had they destroyed? What other truths had they swallowed without tasting? What kind of civilization were they really? The AI aboard the ship did not answer. It did not need to, because the most powerful voice in the galaxy now was their own turned inward. The enemy they feared had never been human. It had always been their reflection. And as the Ghost-class ship finally pulled away from the tribunal station, it left no crater, no wreckage, just one message, etched into the orbit of the world using gravimetric lensing that would remain visible forever. We were not your darkness. You were afraid of our light, and it drifted forward, deeper still, into the center of a galaxy that could no longer lie to itself. The Empire was unraveling, not with explosions, but with memory, and memory would not stop. It happened in silence, just as everything else had, not with a siren or alarm, not with light, but with something deeper, something ancient, as the Ghost-class vessel hovered above the shattered unity of the Empire, and the last truth it carried prepared to step forward. Beneath the forward deck, hidden inside a sealed cryo, chamber untouched since the ship's departure, a pod hissed open for the first time in over 3 centuries. Vapor spilled out, then a breath, then a figure, not a soldier in armor, not a leader, not a god, but a man. Old by human years, scarred not by time but by memory, his eyes opened with no confusion, only recognition. He had seen this moment before, because the Empire had not just erased Earth, they had broadcast its fall to the stars. And Earth had watched, not from vengeance, from silence, and now the silence was ending. He did not speak as he stepped into the command core, only placed one hand on the central interface, and the AI responded like a heartbeat returning to a sleeping body. Doors across the ship slid open, holograms shifted, the map of the Empire dissolved, revealing not borders, but impact sites, each location where a child was buried nameless, where a city was lost without war, where Earth's people had been erased so cleanly that only the ship remembered. And now the man who lived inside that memory breathed again. The Empire's sensors picked it up immediately, life signature, human, confirmed, not synthetic, not archival, alive, and panic spread through the command circles like fire on a dead planet. They had spent generations teaching their citizens that humanity was unstable, violent, extinct, that the Ghost-class ship was either unmanned or autonomous, but now there was a man at the helm, a man who should not exist. A man who had seen the galaxy through a frozen lens and remembered everything. The ship did not alter course. It drifted steadily toward the Empire's ceremonial core, the birthplace of the Silence Protocol, where the vote to erase Earth had been cast under artificial starlight. And across every major species, from the winged nobles of Cathari space to the linked archives of the Triune, eyes turned not toward the Empire, but toward this man, this last witness. They watched as he stood before the ship's main emitter, and for the first time in the journey, he spoke. Just once, just one sentence, and it echoed louder than any weapon. You told the stars we vanished, but we watched the whole time. That was all, and it shattered what the Empire had left, because within that one line came the weight of all they had done and all they had tried to forget. Across military fleets, mutinies sparked without command. Officers who had believed the lie now questioned their own past. Elder historians who once defended the silence protocol now destroyed their own books. Civilians wept in the streets not out of fear but guilt, because it meant the myth of Earth's collapse had been a performance and the ghosts had been watching. The human did not demand surrender. He did not declare war, he simply activated the final layer of the ship's archive, and across the stars, the Empire's oldest lie unraveled. Images of human outposts burned without provocation, recordings of meetings where Earth begged for peace, offered compromise, offered future. And the cold decisions that followed calculated extermination, wrapped in bureaucratic language. The AI amplified the man's heartbeat through every channel, one rhythm, one pulse. The rhythm of a people who had bled without justice and died without recognition. The pulse of humanity. Some planets collapsed into revolution, others into silence, but one by one, the stars aligned not in fear but in mourning, because they finally understood. Earth had not sent an army. It had sent a witness, and that witness had waited for the right moment to speak, not with vengeance, but with proof. The man walked the corridors of his ship like a prophet moving through the last chapters of Scripture. He touched walls that once lit up with his crew's laughter. He stood in the observation deck where his daughter had watched Saturn rise, and now he saw an empire breaking beneath the weight of its own shame. The ship did not fire, it never had to, and yet entire fleets powered down when it passed, not from orders, from choice, because across a galaxy that had lied to itself for 300 years, truth now moved with a human face, and they could not unsee it. The last soldier of Earth had not come to destroy. He had come to remind, and that was worse, because buildings can be rebuilt, ships can be repaired, but memory once awakened does not return to sleep. And with each system the ship crossed, one question remained on every trembling voice. If this is only one man, what else did Earth leave behind? They tried to hold the center, but the center had already vanished, not with war, but with memory. As the last soldier of Earth walked the halls of his ship, the empires that once stood like pillars in the void began to crack along the very foundation they had built their lies upon. It began first with the lesser moon's colonies whose governors shut down their comm towers, not out of protest but shame. Then the border fleets, programmed to intercept hostile forces, refused to move at all. The commanders of the Seventh Ring Armada sent a message to the Empire's capital, saying only this: we will not fire on memory. The human ship had not altered its course, not changed its silence, and yet entire star systems began turning their weapons inward, not out of fear, but confusion. The narrative no longer held. The voice of the Empire, once broadcast across galaxies, was now silent, and in its place fragments of Earth's last days spread like fire. Citizens once fed sanitized history now stood in city squares watching recovered footage of humans holding each other in the final hours, not fighting, not begging, just holding each other. People who were told Earth was violent now wept at the sight of Terran children, drawing pictures of stars they would never reach. Schoolchildren on alien worlds began asking their teachers why the humans were killed. And the teachers had no answers. On one core world, the statues of the Empire's founding generals were torn down by civilians using nothing but candlelight and bare hands. They did not scream. They did not riot. They only wept as they laid those statues at the feet of a newly built monument, a replica of Earth's skyline built from debris and apology. The Empire called for unity. Its ministers gave speeches. Its fleets repositioned, but none of it mattered anymore. The people no longer believed, because belief is not built on control, it is built on trust, and that trust had been murdered the day Earth went silent. Whole planets disconnected from the central grid. Others broadcast Earth's flag for the first time in centuries, not as a threat, but as an act of penance. In the old capital, the High Regent ordered the Ghost-class ship destroyed, claiming it was a weapon designed to destabilize peace. But no fleet responded, not because they could not, because they would not. They had seen the ship pass without firing. They had watched it disable weapons without killing. They had heard the voice of the last human not ask for war, but for truth. And truth was heavier than any weapon. The collapse accelerated when the core council chamber, a floating structure older than some suns, exploded from within, not by sabotage, by vote. The youngest delegates, ashamed of what their elders had done, self-terminated the chamber's energy matrix in an act of final protest. Before their signal went dark, they sent one phrase to every system: "We would rather burn than forget." After that, the Ghost-class ship entered the Heart Zone, the region closest to the Empire's central archives, and without warning, it transmitted a single command: not to attack, not to destroy, but to unlock. Doors that had been sealed for 300 years opened. Files marked as forbidden declassified. Recordings of Earth's final pleas for negotiation, full footage of diplomats gunned down in false flag operations, audio logs of the Empire's top leaders mocking the simplicity of Earth's morality, all of it released in full to every world. There was no longer any debate. The Empire had not survived a threat. It had engineered a genocide, and worse, it had made its children forget. The last soldier of Earth stood in the projection chamber of his ship as the images spread, watching not with vengeance, but with the cold ache of justice fulfilled. He did not need to speak again. The galaxy was already tearing down the Empire for him. On planets that once called humans savages, parades were held in their honor. On stations that once trained assassins to erase Earth's memory, students now gathered to read human poetry. Old religions incorporated Earth into their prophecy. One called the last ship the vessel of reckoning, another simply named it forgiveness, but across every language, every world, every belief, the message was the same: the Empire had ended, not with war, but with truth, and the truth had returned on a ship that never once fired. The last soldier did not land. He did not demand tribute. He simply remained in orbit, and that presence alone was enough to break a galactic dynasty that had ruled for generations. The Empire, as a structure, still stood in code and metal, but in the minds of the people it no longer existed. What replaced it was not yet clear. Only one thing was: Earth was never gone. It had only gone silent. And now that silence had spoken, it began as a flicker across forgotten channels, a signal not routed through official networks, not filtered by command towers or military encryptions, but something older, purer, laced into the gravity of space itself. Across thousands of systems, stars dimmed slightly, not from damage, from deference. Because the Ghost-class vessel had opened its last archive, it did not send a message, it sent a broadcast. A wave of light and sound and memory that moved faster than any fleet, louder than any weapon, and older than the silence that had buried it. One by one, every screen, every holo, emitter, every sound array once touched by human tech blinked to life, regardless of permission. On agricultural moons and mining colonies, on battle cruisers and black market stations, on temple walls and palace ceilings, everywhere, the galaxy stopped not from fear but instinct, because whatever this was, it did not come to conquer. It came to be heard, and what they heard first was a child, a human child laughing, not screaming, not pleading, laughing as her voice echoed through what must have been a field on Earth, chasing birds, shouting to her mother to come look at the sky. Then a father reading bedtime stories in a language long deleted from translation archives. Then a classroom full of students naming stars through telescopes they had built themselves. Then music, then silence. Then war. The footage did not flinch. It showed the bombings, the fires, the evacuations, the debates in orbit as Earth's diplomats pleaded for a ceasefire that would never come. It showed the Empire's first fleet descending through cloud banks. It showed children carried in arms. It showed promises broken. Then it showed names, hundreds of thousands of names, projected across the galaxy, not as a list, but as a rhythm. Every name spoken aloud by the ship's AI, each one like a beat in a heart that refused to die. Names of cities, names of families, names of songs, and then names of the species who had voted to erase them, not for revenge, but for memory. The broadcast was not meant to hurt. It was meant to hold up a mirror. And it worked. On the war moons of Draxil, soldiers wept. On the ivory libraries of Velar Prime, scholars tore down volumes marked human hostility models. On the underwater cities of Othal, entire schools held silence as they listened to the human anthem play, not one of violence, but of return. The Empire could not jam the signal. Every attempt to disrupt it was turned inward. Ships that tried to block the transmission found themselves playing it louder. Even old ships from the Earth War, long decommissioned and rusted, activated. Their backup cores powered on for the first time in centuries, solely to amplify the memory. The galaxy had always said humans were too emotional, too fragile, too attached to the past, but now it understood emotion was not a weakness. It was a weapon of remembrance, and humanity had weaponized grief into legacy. Across the broadcast, scenes began to play of the Empire's first lies, training sessions where officials were coached on how to speak of Earth in terms of aggression and instability. Edited footage used to sway public opinion. Meetings where galactic law was twisted just enough to justify silence, all of it exposed, all of it undeniable. The Empire's final defense collapsed not from pressure, but from shame, and still the broadcast did not end. It moved into deep time, showing the last human colony ships, burned before they reached neutral space, showing mothers covering their children in cryopods, knowing they would never wake up beside them. Showing the Ghost-class vessel being launched not from a base, but from a crater, the only part of Earth that still stood. Then the voice returned, the same voice that had spoken before, the last soldier of Earth. He said nothing of war, he said nothing of justice. He only said, "You told the galaxy we were gone, but what you buried was not silence. It was memory, and now you remember." The screen turned black. But the sound continued a single heartbeat, human, fragile, unstoppable, and then, in every language known, across every channel still echoing, 3 words appeared, not signed, not demanded, only given. Let them rest, that was all, and yet it was everything, because it meant humanity did not seek retribution. It had already won, the Empire was no more, the systems had no rulers, the truth had broken their chains. And as the Ghost-class ship powered down its emitter and began its final journey, billions across the stars stood in silence, not in obedience, but in mourning. They had watched Earth die once. Now they would never forget it lived. And in that silence a new law was born, not from mandate, from understanding. Memory is sacred, and no voice is ever truly lost. It did not leave with fanfare or final words, did not linger in orbit to be saluted or pursued, did not broadcast coordinates or signal intent. It simply turned, slowly, quietly, toward the galactic core, the place where gravity eats time and light, forgets its shape. The Ghost-class vessel had done what no warship, no council, no revolution could. It had made them remember, not just the dead, not just Earth, but themselves, and now, having returned the weight of memory to the stars that betrayed it, the ship moved into silence again, the kind of silence that speaks only to those willing to listen. The last soldier of Earth did not step out onto a foreign throne. He did not wear medals. He did not lead an armada. He stood alone in the heart of the ship, watching through a translucent shield as galaxies bent under the pull of the black hole ahead. Around him lights dimmed, systems shut down one by one, not from damage, from decision. There was nothing more to say, and in that sacred hush he walked to the pod, the same one that had preserved him across centuries of loss, and laid himself down again. Not in defeat, in peace, the AI, now fully awake, whispered its final transmission into the dark. Let this remind you, memory never dies. No empire followed, no weapon reached. Even those who might have sought revenge only watched from afar, humbled. Because they knew if they chased him, it would not be to fight him. It would be to find out how he endured. The ship entered the galactic core like a comet swallowed by shadow, leaving behind no wreckage, no signal. Only impact, because every child now knew the name of the blue planet that once burned. Every species now carried laws protecting memory. Every archive had one locked section marked simply Earth. And everywhere, from frozen moons to fire, lit capitals, moments of silence were held, not by decree, but by will. On the anniversary of the broadcast, systems dimmed their cities for 1 hour, so the stars could shine, so people could look up and remember not just the ship, not just the human, but what they themselves had become in its absence. And in that hour of darkness, many said they could feel something, not a signal, not a voice, but presence, the kind that comes when truth is no longer a threat, when grief has finally carved space for peace. Some say the ship still drifts beyond the black hole, watching. Some say it became part of the singularity itself, fusing memory into gravity. Others believe it never existed, that it was a myth built from guilt. But the monuments say otherwise. Built not by mandate, but by apology, the largest monument to Earth now floats on a moon once used as a weapons platform. It bears no weapons now. Only a sculpture, a single ship facing a single star, cast in obsidian and steel, surrounded by names too many to count. The last plaque says nothing of vengeance. It simply says, you cannot silence those who carry the truth. And beside it, a star map of Earth's sky, the constellations humans once named, preserved exactly as they were the night the sky went dark. In the end, the ship never returned. It never needed to. It had already done what it came to do. It reminded the universe that extinction is not the end, that silence can echo louder than war, that the dead do not rest until the truth is known, and most of all that one ship, one memory, one man, can undo 1,000 years of lies if they refuse to forget. The galaxy did not recover from the crossing. It evolved, and though Earth may never rise again, it no longer needs to, because now, in the quiet spaces between stars, every empire fears the day their silence is broken. Not by fleets, not by fire, but by one voice, saying we remember you.